Welcome to the normal seeming but strangely surreal world of Simon Stålenhag. Welcome to Mad on Books, where I talk about fantasy mostly, science fiction sometimes, and comics occasionally. I've only done one video like this before, but I intend to do many, many more because one of the things I love a lot in the world of science fiction and fantasy is the artists involved, the ones who paint the covers, who put out posters and that kind of thing, creating new worlds in a visual way. And Simon Stålenhag is one of my favorites, my absolute favorites. A little history, how I found him. I play role-playing games, which I've mentioned before. If you're not into role-playing games, stay tuned. It's only a brief mention, but I found an interesting game called Tales from the Loop, which is essentially, if you don't really know role-playing games, in Dungeons & Dragons, for example, you play fantasy heroes like you would find in Lord of the Rings. In this particular one, you play Swedish children living in a very strange place. And the game book, is illustrated with these charming illustrations. And very much like the other video I did about Wesen by Johan Egerkrans, this book has all sorts of illustrations done by an artist. It also has really nice graphic design, but it has lots of illustrations done by an artist. So after I found the game, I looked him up, and it's Simon Stålenhag. The book that the game came from is also called Tales from the Loop. And the book itself is quite lovely. It's got sort of a linen spine and really, really good printing quality, lovely paper. It's a gorgeous little book. Actually, it's not that little. And it's an interesting book because it's not only art. He is an artist, he's a musician, he writes, he does lots of different things, seems like he can do anything. And the book is a collection of his art, and it's also short little descriptions and stories, which are presented as being essentially true. The introduction by him is a brief history of the Loop project. The Loop is this huge atomic research facility built underground, and it's a big ring. And he's telling the story as if he grew up in Mälarö, which is where the Loop is built, and he's going through his memories as a child growing up there. And one of the interesting things is he says, the stories I tell here are mostly based on the memories of myself and others, especially my childhood friend Ola, who possesses a near eidetic memory and has been able to recall all our schoolyard stories down to the smallest detail. I'm eternally grateful to him for his help with the content of this book. That totally reminded me of recently reading Shadow of the Torturer, where it's a first-person narrative told by a character called Severian. And Severian says over and over again that he has a perfect memory and he never forgets anything. So he's obviously writing this to lend some credence to these stories. And then what you've got, I'll show you one of the spreads with the story. You've got these interesting images, and on the page next to them is a little short story about what it is. And these are told from the perspective of a grown man remembering when he was a child and these things happened, or these things were around where he lived and he discovered them as a kid. And it gives it all a feeling of being real and being normal. And that's interesting because the art is exactly that. Apparently, Simon's process is he is Swedish. He grew up in Sweden, and he went around a lot of these areas where he grew up and took photos. and painted landscapes of places that he used to live or that were near his old house or that looked typically Swedish. And I've been to Sweden many times, and I can say that all of the landscapes he paints, they do indeed look exactly like Sweden. Yeah, they are pretty true Swedish landscapes. The only thing that isn't so typically Swedish are the bizarre machines and creatures that are sitting in these landscapes. He has created this idea of the loop and this strange technological marvel that existed and that then warped reality and created a whole bunch of strange things that never actually existed in Sweden or anywhere else. And it's amazing because the paintings feel so real because they are actually just real landscapes. But of course, they've then got stuff in them that is absolutely not at all real, that you will never see anywhere else. They're also beautifully painted. I did a little research on him and his process. Apparently, they're all digitally painted. I was actually a little doubtful that they were digitally painted. When I first saw the book, I thought, wow, these are beautiful paintings. And they felt very much like paintings, like physical paintings. But apparently it's all digital. And he's put a lot of effort into making them look as non-digital, as physical as possible. Apparently he spent a whole lot of time working with different digital brushes and things to try and get a feeling that is really, really physical. And it feels like a really believable world. And it's got a certain kind of, not just because of the stories, but also because of many of the images, it's got a certain kind of nostalgic feeling, like this kid standing in a field with his sled. But there are giant glowing-eyed boars not too far away, which of course isn't very real. But because of this nostalgic, dreamlike feeling of a kid's memory, they end up feeling even more real. It feels like, even though they're so bizarre and there are strange things in all of the pictures, it feels like a place you could go. And I absolutely love his work. I strongly recommend you look into it. He's got, this was his first book, Tales from the Loop. And then he's got, I believe, 3 more, or maybe 4 more. He's got Things from the Loop. He's got Things from the Flood, The Electric State, and The Labyrinth. So 5 books total. I've got all of them, just because I totally love his work. Let me know down in the comments if you're at all interested in seeing more about his other books. The other thing that's really cool about this is it actually inspired Amazon. I think Amazon probably wanted to jump on the Stranger Things bandwagon. Stranger Things was very, very popular, and it's all centered around this sort of nostalgic feeling with kids as the primary characters. Stålenhag's work inspired a short-lived, unfortunately, Amazon TV series called Tales from Loop, which unfortunately was kind of boring, but it was really, really true to his work, visually at least. Yeah, there were some scenes in it which almost one-to-one felt like one of his paintings. Yeah, they obviously stuck very, very closely to his actual original artwork, which was amazing. Apparently The Electric State, which is one of his later books, which is a story and a series of images of a girl in Pacifica, which is meant to be a theoretical state or a story, a fictional state in the US. And it's a girl wandering around with her little robot buddy. And apparently that's been optioned for a movie, I think, which, you know, may or may not end up being made. But I think the last news was a year or 2 ago, and it sounded like it was being made. So we'll see if that actually hits screens anywhere, anytime. But Simon Stålenhag, amazing artist, beautiful, beautiful work with such an interesting vibe to it. I highly recommend you go and check it out. On his website, which I'll link to down below, he has a lot of images in pretty high resolution that you can see on his site. You don't necessarily need to buy the books, but I recommend always, encourage always supporting artists and buying their stuff, because that keeps them doing amazing things like this. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're well. Keep reading awesome art books, and I will see you next time.